Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Carl Bacher, and I'm here this afternoon to talk to you guys about running enterprise workloads on AWS, so specifically SAP. We've got a wonderful customer and a wonderful partner here with us this afternoon that are going to share their journey of running a mission-critical workload on the AWS platform. We have today Hudson and Eric as part of Harris Logic that are going to be talking about how they use the SAP HANA analytics platform on AWS. So just a quick schedule of events. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our AWS platform and our SAP support in the beginning. I'll hand it over to Hudson to talk about their journey, and then we'll wrap about where AWS is investing and going forward in the future on the SAP platform. So to kick things off, AWS opened their doors in 2006, or I should say opened their APIs. Our first service was actually S3, a service that many of you may be familiar with and use in your everyday enterprise applications. But since then, we've been investing and innovating in our platform continually for over the past 10 years. Specifically in the enterprise space and the SAP space, SAP actually became a customer of ours since 2008. So they've been a customer of AWS for over 10 years. And through this chart here, we call this our pace of innovation, our pace of investment in enterprise platforms on AWS, so namely SAP, where we have a series of milestones that we've been accomplishing over the last several years. So as I mentioned, SAP became a customer in 2008. SAP became a partner of ours in 2011, so we have a strong partnership with the SAP team. And essentially what that means for us is that as they certify and build new products in their platform, we certify it on our platform. So AWS is a certified production hyperscale cloud provider for SAP enterprise applications. I won't read through all of these bullets here, but what you want to take away as a customer or someone exploring the opportunity of SAP on AWS is as SAP has been releasing new services, products, and platforms, we've been matching that and innovating with them as well. So some key bullets up here were our early infrastructure releases in 2016 around our X1 platform. So this is a high in-memory instance certified for SAP HANA. Throughout 2017, we invested in migration programs, and additional larger infrastructure for SAP environments, again, certified to run production workloads. And then recently in 2018, we made some great announcements a few months ago at the SAP Sapphire conference about investing, again, in infrastructure, but also investing in digital transformation and business applications that interface with SAP on AWS. So namely, we made some new infrastructure announcements. I'll talk about that a little bit later in the presentation. We announced our app streaming service with the ability to stream SAP GUI through AWS AppStream. And then a little bit in the digital transformation piece, which I'll share a little bit later in the presentation. We have IoT, AI, ML, Deep Lens, and Alexa integration with SAP applications. So again, takeaways, we've got a strong partnership with SAP. They've been a customer of ours for a long time, and we work hand in hand together. SAP themselves are running a number of platforms that you might be familiar with today in the SaaS offering on AWS. So things such as Concur, SuccessFactors, Hybris, and many, many others. So again, it's a very, very strong and trusted relationship between the two companies. So changing gears a little bit, talking about being Amazonian, which is a term that we call ourselves as Amazon or AWS employees, is everything that we like to do or strategize with customers uses a concept called two-way doors. So in a one-way door, you make a decision, you're committed to it, similar to jumping out of a plane, right? Once you jump out, gravity's got one job, it's bringing you down. But with a two-way door concept, being Amazonian or AWS focused, we want to create a platform where customers can fail fast, experiment, have little to no upfront cost of trying things on the platform, and if it works great and it meets their KPIs and business success criteria, let's move forward. Let's continue investing in that. If it doesn't, there's no long-term commitments. So with our platform and as we design enterprise solutions, we want to make sure that our customers and our partners and people exploring our platform understand the concept of two-way doors. We don't want people to be afraid of experimenting or trying new things. And this is a little bit odd in the SAP use case. So traditionally in SAP use case, we were buying infrastructure, racking and stacking it, imaging it, and then doing a POC, and then trying to figure out what we're doing with it 6 to 18 months later. This is different on the AWS platform. So we want people to think differently and understand that they have a platform that they can experiment on. So again, remember the concept of two-way doors as we look at SAP environments on AWS. AWS has also built a self-service platform that is available to everyone. So whether we want to run a small POC environment on AWS to try a new SAP product, or we want to load all of our production data and run some FAT, UAT testing in AWS, we can do that as well, all on a self-service platform. So meaning that anyone as a customer and an AWS account owner can spin up any infrastructure that they need, which is certified to run SAP workloads, test, experiment, prove the platform, prove the use case, move forward if necessary. If not, they can always roll back. So again, no long-term commitments there. We want to make sure we create a platform where people can experiment on. So in terms of our SAP strategy, it's a journey for everyone. So every customer who's running SAP, whether it be ERP, Hybris, SuccessFactors, you pick your favorite SAP product, everyone's on a journey of transformation. So it could be a journey around database transformation, a journey around digital transformation. So it just depends where you are in the SAP lifecycle. I have the opportunity to meet with customers all over the country, and everyone has a similar destination for SAP workloads. So focus a little bit on the digital transformation and database replatforming. But with any trip or any journey, there's many different ways to get there. And we want to make sure AWS customers understand that there's many different paths to success with SAP and AWS. We call this our 360 strategy. And if I break it down by quadrant or slice of the pie, if you will, we've got solutions for customers and partners in each of those areas. So I'll start with more infrastructure focus at the bottom. So from an AWS perspective, all of the databases which are certified for SAP are certified on AWS. So we can talk about ASC, HANA, Oracle, DB2. Again, if it's certified by SAP, if there's a note that says it's OK to run SAP on this database platform, it runs on AWS. So some customers are looking at their journey, which involves replatforming their SAP system. Some customers are also looking at, how do I change my digital core application layer of SAP? Is it time to go to S4 HANA? Is it time to go to BW for HANA? Should I be looking at Suite on HANA, depending on what is the right, again, journey for you as a customer or a partner? In terms of simplifying the platform, as I mentioned before, there's a lot of customers that are looking to simplify their SAP solution with SaaS solutions, so things such as Concur, Ariba, Fieldglass, and Hybris, again, a certified platform for production-grade workloads on AWS. At the top pillar, we have our partners. So we have a number of AWS partners who are certified to run SAP workloads on AWS. We've certified them so we understand that they have met the bar, in an Amazonian term, to help customers such as yourself run SAP workloads on AWS. And then the last piece that I want to talk about is the extend. So I believe that, I think most of you would as well, that SAP is the single source of truth of all businesses. Lots of master data, lots of transactional data, structured tables, and we call this the system of record. We have a lot of new technologies coming out where AWS and others are investing, such as IoT, machine learning, Alexa, things of that nature, that we want to help customers integrate that with on the SAP platform running on AWS. So by moving these environments to AWS, you've unlocked a new extendability or upgrade for your SAP environment to meet the demands of your business in the future. So again, no matter what your workload is, we consider it a mission-critical workload on AWS. We've got different maps or roads to success in your SAP journey, and we treat every workload as a mission-critical workload. So I'd like to welcome up the folks from Harris Logic and talk about their mission-critical workload on AWS.
Thank you, Carl. Hello, everyone. My name is Hudson Harris. I'm the Chief Engagement Officer for a company named Harris Logic, and we are a behavioral health and technology services company. So everything that we do works in a little different way than a lot of other technology vendors out there. We actually started providing behavioral health services in 1982 to underserved populations. And so what I'm going to talk to you today about is how technology can advance the state of mental health care and how we used AWS to achieve some pretty amazing things. So before we get too far, I want to kind of get everybody on the same page as to what the state of mental health is right now. So mental health is a very personal thing. It's also something that's very stigmatized. So what I'd like to do is start with a simple question. Who here knows somebody with a mental health condition or has a friend or a family member or does themselves, please raise your hand. Pretty much everyone in the room raises their hand. Every time I ask that question, that's what happens. But the challenge there is that despite this being such a pervasive problem, the solutions are so few. The World Health Organization has identified depression as the #1 cause of disability on the planet. The suicide is the second leading cause of death for college-age students, and it is the third leading cause of death for K through 12. Yet everything that we're doing and everything that we're working on to fix isn't really helping the problem, because the technology is bad. The technology doesn't do what it's supposed to. Everywhere else in the world, when we have a problem, supply chain management, logistics, how we're going to get things from point A to point B, we use technology to drive it. Behavioral health has not had that happen. 7 or 8 years ago, meaningful use came out. Some of you might be familiar with meaningful use, but meaningful use is the reason that we have the EHR industry, Epic, Cerner, et cetera. $34 billion of payments in 7 years, incentivizing doctors to use an EHR. But did any of you know that behavioral health, mental health, substance abuse was left completely out of that? So the result of that is that we don't have a technological infrastructure to support the most complex and pervasive healthcare problem of our time. 10 years ago, 9 out of 10 doctors documented by hand. Right now, over 90% are using an electronic health record, and that number is growing every single day. In the span of 7 years, that entire industry has been transformed. In one of the largest studies of its kind, behavioral health providers surveyed across the country, only 2% would be eligible for meaningful use right now. The truth is that the industry just doesn't use technology. It doesn't use any of the amazing analytics and tools that we've all developed and become familiar with, because change is hard, and change is scary, and mental health is something that's stigmatized, and even everybody raising their hand here, that's not a common thing. And at a macro level, what we see is that mental health in the United States is completely broken. The 3 largest mental health facilities in this country are jails. Wrap your brains around that. The 3 largest facilities for psychiatric mental health care are jails. In last year, over $200 billion of lost earnings were attributed to mental health issues. And that point is where our story begins. Because what we wanted to do, starting in 1998, was take what we knew were clinical best practices and pair them with technical best practices. And back then, the technology options are even less than they are now. We were working with crystal reports back in the day. So we decided to develop our own technology. We decided to take what we had learned and build something that worked better. So here we are today. That's kind of the overview of where everything is. The mental health cycle is how this plays out. Let's go through a story. I have a friend named Tom. Tom is schizophrenic. He's homeless. He has paranoid delusions. He stays on his meds when he gets reminded, but cycling in and out of things doesn't really help him. So Tom has a bad day, and we have the mental health event. He has a break. He gets angry. He gets violent. He's screaming. And 911, EMS, and police are called. And this is a fairly standard reaction. Most communities don't have mobile crisis operators, clinicians that will go into the field. So we have 911, EMS, and police show up. From there, the cycle is pretty predictable. The emergency department is usually the first stop if there's a non-criminal activity. Last year, ED spent $186 billion in mental health care. It is the #1 expense for emergency departments, and it is the lowest return on investment for emergency departments. It's absolutely killing them. But if they don't go to the emergency department, they'll go to jail. Last year, we spent $22 billion in jails on mental health care. New York City alone spends over $180,000 per year per inmate. But there's no treatment. That's the problem. Emergency departments aren't designed to treat mental health. It's the only condition you can walk into an emergency department with and not get treatment. All they do is stabilize. And then they'll get you to a psychiatric hospital. And last year, psychiatric hospitals cost $30 billion. And I'm going to introduce a word to you guys because this is something that I think is a really core concept to what we have to understand about using technology in mental health. Psychiatric hospitals and emergency departments have what's called an iatrogenic effect. The iatrogenic effect is where the treatment is worse than the problem. Going to a hospital, going to an ED, going to jail is a terrible way to work with depression, schizophrenia, paranoid delusions. It has the opposite effect. It makes things worse. So as Tom cycles in and out of the emergency department, the psychiatric hospital, the jails, he goes back into the community, and there's a connection failure. Because as soon as he's discharged from any of these facilities, nobody's there to help. He'll have a few days of medicine, he may have a couple referrals and a pamphlet, and then he's just kicked right back out, and he cycles right back through the entire thing again. So there's the problem. This is the cycle. So this is how we start to address and fix this. So system mapping. A lot of technology people here. Who's ever mapped a network? Who's ever mapped out the data flows in their organizations? Who's ever worked out supply chain logistics of how you're going to get things to a place to be sold? A lot of people. It's something we do on the regular in this industry. But it's not something that we do in mental health. So as you look at your systems and you look at what you're trying to accomplish, think about how you're going to map out the emergency departments, the providers, the agencies, the payors. Who's paying for this? Because if you follow the money, you'll find out where people are not getting the care they need. Because right now, we're paying far too much for far too little when it comes to mental health care. And now that CMS, Centers for Medicaid Services, is starting to look at meaningful use pilots for behavioral health, you can guarantee that those huge amounts of dollars that plowed into medical are going to start to plow into behavioral health as well. So when we started our project to move our application stack into AWS, we really approached it from a very methodical point of view. We wanted to understand at a core level how to actually make technology useful. Because having reports is great, having insights are great, but it has to be actionable. So what we did is we started at a very basic level and we mapped out our workflow. We said, what is actually happening on the day-to-day basis for the people on the ground? So all of our technology is led with clinical innovation people. So we have our clinicians working with our technology people, with our data scientists, to say, here's what I go through, here's what I need. Because people are falling through the cracks in our system. And where they're falling through the cracks is with those clinicians. They're falling through at the most basic point of service sites. So the next step, you're going to hear me say this a few times, is clinical, evidence-based practices. So last year, 1 out of 3 people who received treatment for a serious mental illness received an evidence-based treatment. So I'm going to say that another way. If you went to an emergency department with a broken ankle, would you want to get a 1 out of 3 chance that they were going to cast it and set it according to science and medicine? Or would you want to know they were going to do things the right way? The truth is that the clinical best practices are out there. Treatment for severe mental illnesses is out there, but we don't use it. We haven't really gotten everybody behind this idea. The next one is technical. And this was really the core pivot for us as an organization. We had developed on-prem solutions for a very long time, both for ourselves and for our clients. We had done that type of application integration, and it's hard work. Like, we literally had a humongous application stack go down because somebody swapped out a router and didn't tell someone else and then left for Aruba for a week, and nobody knew which settings weren't correct, and an entire application stack went down. So for us, going to the cloud was the only choice. So we looked at what was out there, what we could use that would help us communicate to our clients that this was fast, easy to use, and work really, really well all the time. Because in this field, mental health clinicians, behavioral health specialists, they don't really like technology. So the first time it doesn't work, you've lost half your audience. So when I give a demo of what we do and I talk to people, I actually start with our entire environment shut off. And then I log into the AWS console, and I show them, as a non-tech person, how easy it is to just go start instance. And I show them, nothing's here, now something's here. And we can see the data flow in, we can see the analytics work, we can see all that information start to go. Those really core, basic level experiences for people are what's going to shape the rest of their view of not only what you're building for them, but technology and how to move it forward. So getting something that works easy reduces those barriers to entry. And when we picked AWS, it was also to bring down our total cost of ownership. We kept chasing our tails with how much we were spending on on-prem, in-rack technology, that it just wasn't worth it. We had to find something that let us really have that low cost of ownership that we could use when we needed and back out when we didn't. The next one was data integration. This was one that I think really set apart our efforts from a lot of other ones out there. We took data streams from virtually everywhere, and we'll get into a little bit more later what data streams we brought in. But we take data streams all the way from super complex data feeds down to black screen, green text entry systems. Because the governments we work with, the agencies we work with, are going to have legacy data systems. So we created a data integration engine that let us match to find people. So we got a single list of clients, and then we fed the data in around them. The business intelligence. This is a really important portion of what we're doing, and this seems basic here, but it's something that you have to communicate in really simple terms. We did a huge pilot project with Centers for Medicaid Services. There were 64 total projects in the region the first year. The second year, there were 2. 60 projects failed because they didn't have the ability to report on the business intelligence that they had. The quote that I like to use is from Robert Heinlein, Stranger in a Strange Land. He says, if you've got the truth, you can demonstrate it. Talking doesn't prove it. And that's something that we have to bring into what we're doing. We have to show the value of this types of business intelligence, because otherwise, we lose contracts, we lose opportunities, and on down the road. The last one is predictive analytics. And I put this last because there's so much low-hanging fruit in what we're doing in this arena that predictive analytics is far enough out there that we can really be thoughtful about how we're doing it and what we're doing and what we're using it for. Because when you get into mental health, using predictive analytics is something that can't replace the person, it needs to support the person. We call it clinical decision support. So it's using business intelligence, predictive analytics, live data streams to inform a clinician of what you need right there and what that person needs right there. So I'm going to take a brief segue and talk about our predictive analytics pilot. We did this pilot not long ago with EV Technologies and ran it on the AWS infrastructure using SAP HANA. The challenge here was, given our position with data, that we have 10 years of crisis data, and we also have all of this jail data, could we figure out the types of services and who needs services? So see, in Dallas, we're the 911 of mental health. We're an AAS, American Association of Suicidology accredited crisis center, provide mobile crisis operations. If you've ever been in Dallas, you've been covered by us. It's everybody in the entire area. We also run a mental health jail diversion program in Dallas that we'll talk a little bit about later, where we brought technology to an antiquated system and really, truly created digital transformation of how they do things. But so since we're on both sides of that, both clinical and technical, we put that data together to say, could we predict who was most at risk for returning with mental health issues? Could we predict who needs services? Because right now, when you go into jail or a hospital or an emergency department with a mental health issue, you just get a fire hose of services. You're going to get medicines, you're going to get referrals, you're going to get pamphlets, you're going to get a discharge, or you're going to go to the hospital, or you're going to go to the jail. There's no focus of precision medicine on mental health yet. So this was our first attempt. And what we found, despite what a lot of people said, was that it is possible. You actually can get meaningful data out of all these disparate data sets about mental health that matter. So the first question was, could we predict who was most at risk for returning? And I want to give a caveat that the goal of this project was to determine who needed more services. We do jail diversion, pretrial diversion. So the goal was who needs the most intensive services. With our pilot, we took 30 months of data, crisis and criminal justice, and we paired it and we tested it against the next 6 months. We were able to predict with a 72% degree of accuracy who would return within 6 months. The other side of the coin was that we were able to predict with a 99% degree of accuracy who would not return. And these elements encompassed everything from diagnoses, pharmacy, criminal charges, mental health, physical health, longitudinal EHR data. It was in a humongous data set. But we were able to tell and narrow it down using predictive analytics, live risk scores for this population. So coming back to our cycle, coming back to Tom, the goal of what we're going to do here today is going to show how you use technology to break this cycle. Because this high utilizer cycle is not only eating up revenue and margins and healthcare across the country, but it has a tremendous human impact. The individuals who are going in and out of these cycles, they will go 40 or 50 times in a single year. If you book into a jail, your odds of returning, if you have a mental health condition, are 67% within the next 6 months. The system is not designed to support individuals with mental health. So we have to use tools, technology, to fix that. So remember Tom, 911 and EMS are called. He goes to the emergency department, psych ED, jail, and there's a failure to connect. And this is happening every single day. There are some cities where these individuals, the high utilizers, will consume 20 or 30% of the region-wide resources for healthcare. If you take what we're spending in mental health in the emergency department setting or the psych hospital setting, those incidents can run $10,000 to $12,000 per event. The cost in the community for behavioral health services that work, $7 to $10 a day. So a single event is wiping out any possibility of an ROI in a situation like this, and the individual gets worse and cycles through. So here we go with Tom. And so what we did is we rolled it back. And we said, where can we go into the system and intercept people before the cycle starts? How do we get to people before that infinity loop starts to go? Because if you can catch someone before, you're much more likely to get them out of the system. And if you catch someone that's already in it, we've shown that you can actually get them out of it. So what we did is we created a diversion software that sits at the center in the criminal justice system in Dallas. And it takes all the data in from the jails, the courts, Medicaid data, state data, criminal justice. It's a humongous amount of data. And what we do is we took it from 2 to 3 weeks to identify an individual for a jail diversion program to 15 minutes. So what would take a program or a single clinician almost a month, we do in 15 minutes, say, hey, this is the person you should be talking to. They're alerted, they're notified, and we create a diversion opportunity. So now we're doing diversions in emergency departments as well. So you can do diversions in emergency departments, you can do them in jail. And what happens is that if you use a system that leverages all of the amazing technology that we're all here to talk about, you start to coordinate care. You start to be able to hold people accountable, track people through the system, prevent people from falling through the cracks. And what we found is that by doing this, getting people engaged with community-based wellness, we change lives. We change thousands of lives. We help people who've been cycling in and out of these things over and over and over again to get quality of life back with their family. And it was all built on our 2 core tenets, technology best practices paired with clinical best practices. But as I said earlier, if you've got the proof, if you can show it, demonstrate it. So here's what actually happened. We ran a mental health diversion program, still are, for 4 years. Our technology supports it. We have multiple entities living in the same space. And over the course of 4 years, for a relatively small investment, they have seen incredible ROI. In 4 years, a mental health jail diversion program saved $30 million of net revenue. That's how much we're spending in the criminal justice system on mental health, that a program like ours saved $30 million. It was unheard of. They had a 25% reduction in higher levels of care. So these are unnecessary hospitalizations, super expensive holds. And we were the only program in the entire state of Texas to hit 100% of the data metrics using business intelligence to show that we were doing the things that we said we were doing. The reduction in the average daily jail population was 20%. So 4 years, and these were the metrics that we were able to hit. But if we look at the recidivism, your likelihood to return, that's really the key metric. 5.5% reduction in recidivism. This number seems small if you're not in criminal justice or in this field, but I will tell you that this is a mountain. This is an absolute incredible move for a population that's high risk, high use, and low response to treatment. They also had a 4-to-1 investment, 4-to-1 ROI. They paid back the entire project cost in the first year of working with us. So the other aspect, the other diversion point, emergency departments. Now, emergency departments are very complex, they're very high stress, they are boilerplate environments. And in September of last year, we became the gatekeepers for every inpatient admission in the Dallas area. 23 EDs spread across 5,500 square miles. And the goal was accurate level of care determinations. What is the care that somebody actually needs? Because a lot of times if you go to an emergency department, you're not treating, you're stabilizing. It's a safety issue. You're keeping the doctor safe, you're keeping other patients safe, you're keeping the person safe from themselves, so you're not treating them. So the knee-jerk reaction around the country is inpatient utilization. They send somebody to inpatient for 23 hours and 59 minutes, they'll send them there for 72 hours or a week. If you go to an emergency department with a mental health condition, your average stay is 18.2 hours. If you're medical, you're 4 hours, give or take a half an hour. So we're holding people longer. If you're going to be admitted, your odds of being boarded for a day or 3, so after the doctor has said what's wrong, after they developed a care plan, you can stay in the ED for 2 or 3 or 4 days sitting in a bed in a hallway. This is boarding. And the ED doesn't work that there's low beds and high beds in terms of cost. If you're there, you're costing a lot of money. But why is that happening? Because there's nothing to pair technical best practices to clinical best practices in the emergency department to give people a single consistent way to approach these. So September of last year, we got put in the spot of evaluating everyone. And our chief of clinical innovations liked to describe it a lot like that first scene from Saving Private Ryan with bombs going off and things going crazy and everything being kind of just absolutely crazy. Because ED docs don't want people telling them what to do. Hospitals don't want people telling them what to do. So what we did is we created a program where we beam into emergency departments with robots. We have robots that we drive through the EDs and we'll do face-to-face assessments. By we, I don't mean me. They don't let me drive the robots. They let our clinicians drive the robots. But we go into these environments with these 5-foot-tall robots with iPad faces, and people respond incredibly. The technology gives them just enough separation of self to be able to talk about what's going on and work through these things. What we found was that over the course of 6 months, about 20% of the people who were going into the EDs with mental health conditions actually needed to go to inpatient care, far less than what anybody had anticipated. And 12 months later, we got our data on some remarkable results. And we just got this data on June 30th. We were able to hit diversion rates far higher than what anybody expected. 87% diversion rate from Baylor Hospital, 86% diversion rate from Methodist Hospital. These are people who otherwise would have been sent to inpatient care, not going. So every single diversion was saving the money and helping that person. So volume-wise here, this is this table, and here's the remaining 13 area hospitals were 84%. So across the region, it was 82% diversion rate. And that was 400 or 500 diversions a month we were doing. So this isn't small numbers. We were doing a lot of assessments, a lot of evaluations. We were all over the county, video nodes in the hospitals, the robots, telephone. And then the tipping point happened. Hospitals got on board with it. Everybody got behind it because the worries about what was going to happen if we diverted using level of care determinations didn't materialize, because when you use evidence-based practices paired with technical best practices, magic happens. So we used our platform that guides documentation and our clinicians, and over the course of 12 months, the number of diversions that came out, the number of diversions that didn't stay in the hospital, saved hospitals 53,000 hours of care. That's a lot of care time. So that's 53,000 hours of nurses not having to watch volatile, high-impact, low-rev patients. That's 53,000 hours that they were able to go help more people and improve the throughput of the emergency department altogether. And what you find in the studies are that if you can get those times down, so we went from 18.2 hours to between 4 to 6 hours, which then created an entirely new wave of positive downstream effects, where the wait times in the ED went down, the dwell times went down, and once you took the pressure off the entire system, people started to get a whole lot better care, because you don't have people that shouldn't be there taking up resources, taking up problems. They got better care in the community where they belonged. And in 12 months, across the entire region, there was a 50% reduction in inpatient bed days. The entire system has transformed. And this is fast. Think about this. Like 6 to 12 months, these were the numbers that we started to get. And all of this was powered from a concept that if you take what we're doing with technology and you take what you're doing with evidence-based practices, you can have really rapid impact. You can take these things and do them quickly, succinctly, and easily. And I'll tell you, having sat through model generation on old systems and model generation on what we're running on SAP HANA, it's incredible. Our ability to watch as, I talk to our data scientists and say, what if we look at these variables, talking through those things and watching our models update live was honestly one of the most amazing things I think I've ever seen. Because what it did is it made it easy to play with the data. It made it easy, even for someone like me who's not a mathematician and not a data scientist, I could even go in and say, what do I think about these data elements? And that's not common. That's not easy to do. And when you put the power of the data in the hands of the people who need it, both from a creation and a use perspective, really, really remarkable things start to happen. So what's next? So we're still working in criminal justice. We're still working in emergency departments. And what we're trying to do now, what we're working towards, is we are coming into mental health for students. Suicide, as I mentioned at the beginning, is the #2 killer of college-age students. It's the #3 killer of K through 12 students. Biobehavioral conditions like depression and anxiety exist 3 to 5 times as high in young females today as it did a generation prior. So we're partnering with universities, we're partnering with different education institutions to change how we're addressing mental health. We're working right now with a medical school to provide on-demand mental health services for medical residents. Medical residents, in case you don't know, are responsible for 80% of the mental health medications prescribed in our country yearly. Yet most of them have never heard of a care plan, a suicide care plan. So we're educating and we're providing services for that population, which is a high-risk, low-utilizer population, as opposed to the other populations we deal with that are high-risk, high-utilizers. We're also partnering with the Zero Suicide Institute. The Zero Suicide Institute is a national nonprofit funded by SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, HHS, Education Development Center, and a variety of other donors and foundations, whose goal is to bring suicide to zero. And it might not be a surprise after what we've talked about today that one of the biggest impediments to zero suicide care is technology. The Henry Ford Health System, 15 years ago, created the origin of zero suicide. Detroit had their patient population had a suicide rate that was 4.5 times the national average. And they set out as an organization to say, how do we stop suicides? How do we get to zero? They went from 4.5 times the national average to zero suicides for 27 straight months. And yet nobody here, usually, has heard of it. Because it's complex, it's evidence-based, and it needs technology. So we're working with them on how to bring technology into the zero suicide world so that we can use these things in the real world to help save lives. The takeaways that I want to give you before we finish is really to build your workflows thoughtfully. As you go through and think about how am I going to make this technology work, how am I going to use these things, get on the ground with the people who are going to either be using it or the people who are going to be receiving the data and understand how they work and what they do. I've learned more in a day in the field with one of our clinicians than I have reading books or talking to people on the phone countless times. The other thing is, focus your efforts when you're looking at new technology and when you're looking at how to transform an aspect of your business, don't be symptomatic in what you do. It is our habit to treat the symptom because it's obvious, it's glaring, it's flashing red a lot of times. What you need to focus on is a systematic, not a symptomatic approach. If you look at what we're doing with mental health care today, we have a symptomatic approach. We'll focus on one problem. We'll focus on opioids. We'll focus on these different small things, which are all huge and impactful and hurt lots of lives. But until we take a systemic approach to what we're doing, until we look at whole system care, we're not going to be able to break that cycle. Because every single dot on that infinity loop that I showed you is an opportunity for a diversion and an opportunity to bring better care to what people are doing. Lastly, just on the mental health side, as we move forward into the next 4 or 5 years and meaningful use hopefully rolls out into this area, as we start to see technology really expand and blossom, it's going to be a revolution of mental health care. What's 1 out of 3 people today treated with evidence-based practices simply won't stand moving forward. States are already passing laws that require organizations to use science. So, use a systematic treatment of mental health using technology and evidence-based practices is the best way we're going to move the needle on getting things done.
Perfect. So, scalability comes into play here too a lot, right? This is a system that can't go down, right? We want these systems to be available for customers and consumers at all times, and the AWS platform offers that. Last, and I didn't write this down earlier, as I was in the audience thinking, what a scalability story right here, right? So we've built great models. How can we scale this, right? So AWS has a global platform, regions globally to deploy this solution that can already be packaged, and then really from there, it's the ability to scale and earn trust with our customers. So again, a little bit different flavor in the SAP use case today, but I think the human element makes it a little bit interesting. So as I mentioned, I want to share a little bit about where AWS is investing in the future of the platform of these mission-critical systems. We want our customers to be able to focus on their core business. Let's forget about replacing hard disks, replacing DIMMs. We had a power supply go bad. Any type of issue in infrastructure maintenance, let AWS take care of that. You focus on your core business. In terms of some recent announcements that we made at the SAP Sapphire conference, we talked about HANA today. AWS has a very, very strong partnership with Intel, and we've been working with them closely for a number of years to invest in our infrastructure roadmap. It's been a wonderful partnership for us. As of the Sapphire conference, so let's call it pre-June 2018, AWS had a number of certified instance types for production workloads for HANA, the largest being our X1E instance, which had a scale up to 4 terabytes, so for those business suite systems. And then with the X1 platform, we could scale out up to 50 terabytes, so analytics platforms, BW, BPC, predictive analytics, things of that nature. Our big announcement at Sapphire was our release of larger instance types, so in-memory, cloud-native 6, 9, and 12 terabyte instances on the AWS platform. So some very, very big instances, and our customers were asking for these instances, and we follow that pace of innovation as well. Perfect use case for loading more analytics data into larger instances, right? So as our customer data goes up, we need to keep more memory or more data hot in memory. We've now released instances in this field here. The thing that makes these instances unique is we've actually changed the hypervisor a little bit on these instances to use our Nitro technology. So what that means is these are bare metal instances, but they still have the same look and feel of all AWS instances in the cloud, meaning that they're API level driven. You can launch them from the console. You can put them inside of an AWS VPC and security group. So the same look and feel that you're familiar with the instances on the left side of the slide here, you have the same look and feel with these new bare metal instances. So again, we made some announcements in the new instance types that will be available for us later this year. We also, and as I mentioned earlier, announced our AppStream platform, which allows us to stream the SAP GUI or other enterprise applications to end users. Could be a great potential use case for, again, these mental health applications where we don't necessarily have all the infrastructure on site to be able to handle a GUI or a front end of an enterprise system. But we can use a web streaming application or, well, I can't think of the word right now, RDP session or essentially virtualization streaming. And then last I wanted to share is that we've been continually investing in automation of the AWS platform. We're helping our customers automate. VDI was the word I was thinking of. Helping with automation as well with the platform. So we've created some what we call build on or quick start guides with AWS. So whether you're an enterprise or just someone that's looking to try out SAP and AWS, we've got a number of quick starts which will allow customers to launch HANA or non-HANA environments in truly a number of minutes on the AWS platform, allow for experimentation, allow for that two-way door concept as well. Last, to wrap up, I want to talk a little bit about digital transformation and where we're continuing to invest in the SAP organization at AWS. So we talked about infrastructure. We talked about 6, 9, and 12 terabyte instances, which again are great, and we're very excited about those, and we're going to continue that pace of innovation to meet the demands of our customers. But we also want to help unlock that SAP data on AWS. So Hudson talked a little bit about using was it an iPad and a video in the hospital and bringing that data back into the environment. We want to enable SAP environments with that as well in terms of next generation things. So IoT integration into SAP and AWS, AI integration into SAP and AWS, DevOps and enterprise apps. So again, thinking of running an enterprise application such as SAP and AWS, we want to be able to serve our business in the future. So what are our customers as ERP owners going to be asking for +5, +10 years? Maybe an Alexa skill that could be used in a hospital to say, Alexa, my patient has these conditions, what's the probability? Think of an API level integration there where we can use HANA predictive analytics. At the end of the day, we see AWS as a platform that has a strong partnership with SAP to run these mission critical workloads, but we also see SAP again as a single source of truth for all businesses. So whether your business is mental health, supply chain, or insert your favorite there, we see that as the source of truth for master and transactional data, but we want to be able to integrate them with the next generation platforms. Some great use cases that we've been building in the AI area are deep lens integration, so image and video recognition into SAP and AWS, perhaps a great use case for the mental health as well. And then we talked a little bit about DevOps and enterprise apps. So anyway, that's the end of our presentation here. If you guys have a chance, we'd love to hear your feedback on the session, and then I'd love to open it up to the room if any questions around Hudson's discussion or anything SAP and AWS related.
So the reason HANA was chosen is just for the speed of in-memory database then, or?
Yeah, sure. That's right by my face. So the first part was, obviously as an in-memory platform, performance was going to be key, but the second was the integration of the predictive engine. Knowing that we were building a new user experience from the ground up for the clinician, we knew it couldn't be batch. We had data coming in at such a frequency, we needed to be able to make that prediction in real time. And so integrating that into the experience natively on HANA was sort of key to the new architecture.
By the way, this is Eric who helped introduce the solution. We just didn't pick him out of the crowd to answer that question. He helped,
I'm the introvert. Yeah, I don't like to talk much.
We just couldn't give him a microphone earlier. But yeah, so again, no matter what the solution, so HANA certainly is an in-memory platform. There's many other in-memory platforms, even some that AWS offers, such as Redshift, that are available. But again, no matter what the platform or the use case we want to support on AWS, we want to make sure that it's treated as a mission-critical workload.
What was that?
Source system?
So today it supports. Yeah, I might as well just hang out up here. The question was, what kind of data sources do we currently support? Especially when you're dealing with state and local governments in our case, the sophistication level is low, right? So we have to be able to support things like flat file uploads, which we do through the simple queue services. But then we also have the ability to expose APIs through Lambda functions and all kinds of other more progressive capabilities as we work with more sophisticated governments. Other questions? Well, again, it came down to that two-part question. It wasn't just an in-memory fast compute problem. It was, can we effectively roll a real-time prediction in? And so the first part of the pilot actually involved SAP Predictive Analytics, if you've ever heard of it. It's a nifty modeling tool, right? I ingest my data. It helps me identify the relevant variables to my model. And as Hudson sort of mentioned, he could sit with a data scientist and iterate over that model many times over. Once we identified the model that had the highest confidence interval and the right mix of variables, we generated that code in R, embedded that inside of stored procs inside of HANA, so that as a clinician visited that screen and the new user experience, that predictive model was firing in the background. And HANA was sort of the best technology for that use case of a real-time prediction on all that historical data and the data streams coming in, not, we're scoring the data once a day kind of thing. Other nerdy questions?
In the back?
Yeah, sure, I have a question. I saw the word Stella up there. Was that about, is that an SAP thing, or is that?
Stella is the name of the technology that Harris Logic developed a long time ago.
I thought it was a beer.
Both.
Okay.
Ask me later. Yeah, so it's the proprietary technology that Harris Logic built on the SAP platform, SAP HANA. Yes, sir?
Why SAP Predictive Analytics? Why not AWS machine learning for safety?
That's a really good question that I don't have an answer for. We started with SAP Predictive Analytics as the modeling tool at the time because as a customer, Harris Logic was already walking down the path of, as an SAP Business Objects customer, we were already heading towards moving their investment to AWS. And so as we started working on this pilot together, SAP PA made sense. It was sort of a natural progression and integrated inside of the engines we were looking at the time. Yes?
Could you touch base on the difference between Nitro and the current hypervisor and why that's important?
Sure. So current hypervisor is a version of Zen, right? So it's an Amazonian enhanced version of Zen. The new Nitro hypervisor, which you'll see flavors of that on the C5 and the M5 instance type, so it'll be a little bit different on bare metal, but we're calling it Nitro for the new next generation platform. The main takeaway is that we're offloading some of the KVM overhead and functionality, or overhead of CPU and memory use on these instances, these virtualized instances, off into a separate area. So essentially it means more performance for the customer, more access to the resource in the box. So as we have these big beefy 6, 9, and 12, I think it's a technical term, beefy instances, 6, 9, and 12 terabyte instances, we want to make sure the customers are getting the best performance out of them. But same look and feel. EBS volumes attached, security groups, VPCs, so it's not a colo, still API level driven cloud native instances. Other questions? Cool, well thank you so much for coming today. I really enjoyed speaking up here with customers and partners. If you have any questions, please send an email to the group and we'd love to get some survey feedback. So thanks again for joining us.